Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast. Alex Moss here, back with a new episode in our Darts Legend series. This week we're joined by a former UK Open champion and one of the real trailblazers in Dutch darts, Roland Scholten. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the former PDC major winner, Roland Scholten. Thanks for the time, Roland. How are you doing?
You're welcome, thank you. I'm fine, thank you. Besides the corona and stuck indoors, but no, it's all right.
Well, it's good to chat to you, and we'll start off really by how we're starting all these, and that is, how did you first get into darts?
Well, my dad had a pub and he had several German shepherds, and I came from the football. I was about 17 or 18. I stopped playing football and I thought, well, I've got to do something. So I started training dogs, and at the dog training club there was a bloke who was actually in the national team, which I didn't know at the time. And there was a dartboard at the dog club. But as being a son of a landlord, I had to participate in all the games and silly things that my dad organised. So if there was a football game, or if there was a table tennis game, or if there was, in this case, darts or cards, then he always said, Roland, you're in team 17, you're team 4, you're in team B. So I had to play anything and everything. And at a certain time, I was put into team 4 with the darts at my dad's pub. And I thought, well, this is actually quite funny. So I started playing a bit of darts and practicing a bit. And because I was at the dog club, and they put a dartboard up there as well, roughly about the same time. And this bloke said, I'm playing in the national team. Would you like to play against me? I thought, well, why not? And he noticed that I was playing quite well. And after, let's say, because I was training the dog 3 times a week and I was practicing at home a bit, after 3-4 months he said, would you like to come to a tournament with me? I said, well, why not? A double tournament. I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with playing a double. He can't blame me then, and he's supposed to be good. He's in the national team. So we won that pairs event, and that's actually where it started, because after that I started playing better in the competition in the 4th division where we started. And from there on it went upwards and upwards and upwards. And after the first year, when we became champion in the 4th division, then I started playing, obviously you go the division higher, so I started playing in the 3rd division, and I thought, well, there was 2nd, there's 1st, and then there's Super League. And I thought, well, why don't I start playing tournaments and see how far I can get? And sooner or later, within weeks, I was playing tournaments where the Super League players were, and where people were which are a lot better than I was at that time. So I thought, well, as soon as I can play against them, why shouldn't I start nationally? And then I started playing nationally into the ranking events that were being held nationally to come into the national squad. So after 3.5 years, I selected straight away for the national selection, which was at that time 16 people, I think. So I thought, well, this ain't bad. Let's see if I can go a bit further. And within the 4th year, I was in the national team. But in the 3rd year, I actually started playing internationally already, at that time with the BDO. And because I was lucky enough to have a sponsor, to have my dad who helped me in any way I could, and I got time off because at that time I run a pub for my dad as well. So I could get my days off, and then I started internationally, and then now in '93 I became world champion, and then it just kept on going from there onwards.
A great story. And just going back to, you mentioned at the start of that answer there about the football. Obviously at that time the football is much bigger in Holland than the darts. Were you keen to maybe go further in the football before then?
Well, the thing is, here in Holland you've got to go into the army for your number. And I played football with, you probably know him, Kenneth Bonko. He used to play for Chelsea and for Southampton for about 9 or 10 years, a big black defender. I used to play loads of years with the youth with him. And because at the end of the youth you go over to the seniors, and by that time I had to go up for my number, so I stopped playing football, and I thought, well, I've got to do something. So that's where the dog training came in, and that's where the darts came in.
Let's get on to the World Cup win that you had in '93. Obviously 2 years before that the World Cup was held in the Netherlands, but '93 in Vegas, that is when you become the World Cup singles champion. Just describe what that moment was like when you won the World Cup.
Oh, when I actually won it, it's overwhelming, obviously, because you don't expect it to win. But then you win it, and then you get this medal, and then you think, well, you throw up this medal, and it comes down like a feather because it's a gold medal, but it doesn't weigh anything. And it's nice to have the title. Obviously, they can't never take that away from you. But besides that, I got one exhibition out of it in Denmark, with Steve Beaton for the television and everything. So, yeah, that was nice. That was very good. And because of the experience, and I was the first one in Holland to become BDO World Champion, yeah, that was nice. You get a lot of attention, you get a lot of media attention, and that's good. That was for the pub, that was good publicity. For myself, it was good publicity, sponsor-wise and everything. So, yeah, that was a great feeling at that time. But, yeah, it only lasts for a certain amount of days, and then you got to go back to reality. Because as soon as the work in holiday in Las Vegas was over, I still had to go back to the pub and start working again.
And not long after you won that World Cup, obviously you're making your Lakeside debut, the Embassy 1994. You go in as the third seed as well, and it's a memorable tournament really off the oche as well, obviously being the first one since the split as well, but you were going in there as one of the highest seeds, if you like. What are your memories of that?
Oh, now you're asking about these sort of memories. I don't know anything about it anymore. I remember a few bits and bobs here and there because I'm not bothered about what happened. I'm more interested in what's going to happen in the future. I'm not to like live in the past. There's certain things, certain moments that I think, oh, that's nice, and certain things that I can feel from my opponents where I think of, well, if you're thinking about these sort of things that don't bother me, then I was looking more in other directions instead of what was happening at that time. There are certain doubles in my career that I'll never forget. There are certain finishes I'll never forget, and there are certain highlights, obviously, but all these tournaments together, I think I've played 18 World Championships. I couldn't remember all of them. So all I can remember from my first World Championships at the Embassy is that I thought, well, this is a bit of an old mess here, so and it's nice to see all these people in here, and because at that time you're going to be announced and you got to go on stage first, and they announce everybody, then you walk on. And I was standing next to Raymond at that time, and he said, oh, you see all these people sitting here? I said, well, I ain't here for all these people. I'm here to beat my opponent. I don't know what you're thinking of. But he was already working on what the crowd could do, where I was actually working myself up to my opponent at that time. And he said, do you see these holes here, these holes in the wall? He said, the cameras. He said, millions of people are watching. I said, yeah, well, I couldn't give a toss. I'm here to win against this bloke. I don't care. These people can see me, but I can't see them. So as long as they don't interrupt me in my work, I won't bother them. I never was worried about other things. I was more concerned about my own game at that time. That might have been insecurity. That might have been like the unknown or whatever. But that's all I actually can remember. He was more worried about other things, where I was more worried about the game at itself.
Things are progressing for you then in the darts. Obviously, we mentioned about the World Cup win. You've made your debut at Lakeside, and 1996, some big wins coming your way. The British Open, the North Holland Open, the Swedish Open, semi-final of the World Masters. So around this time, are you starting to think, wow, the darts could be something that I could really take a lot further?
Yeah, there is. As soon as I became world champion, they've asked us to come and join the WDC at that time, and we thought it was still a bit risky. We've heard that there were envelopes being shared out with no prize money in it, and there was a big war going on, obviously, between the BDO and the WDC at that time. So I waited a bit and see what happened. And then finally in 97, I think, I played with Raymond in the World Pairs, the first one. That was a tryout from the WDC in between the players of the WDC, the 16, and we were the only Dutch couple of the BDO being invited, and we won that event. And then in 97, obviously, I met my wife then, Lisa. So I came over to England, and I decided to try the PDC at that time. And they've asked me to come over, but I needed an autograph from the BDO so that they would let me go, and they didn't want to let me go, so that's why I never played the World Championships in 2000. That was the year that I had to skip, and then I started playing the PDC rankings.
And just really finishing up with your time in the BDO, you mentioned there that you make the switch over eventually, but you had some big runs at the Lakeside. Semi-final was, I believe, 1998, a big week for Dutch darts, obviously, with Raymond going on to lift the title, but yourself getting to the semi-finals, and if you'd have got past that one, it could have been an all-Dutch final.
It could have been, yeah, if I played a bit better. But I think I lost against Richie. He was, at the time, he was phenomenal. He played really, really well, and he had such a stamina. He was such a street fighter. He put so much effort into it, where I had to do it obviously with hard work, but I couldn't perform as what he put into it. He put his heart and soul into it, and for me it was just a game. And yeah, obviously he tried to win, but I couldn't cope with all the fighting spirit that he put in it at that time. And that's actually what I think that made me lose that game.
What was it like going back home and seeing the reaction really to darts? Obviously, you've been a big part of it. You were one of I think you're only the third player to play at the Embassy, Dutch player to play at the Embassy. But obviously, when one of your own wins the title, it's a big moment, isn't it, in helping develop the sport?
Yeah, it was. I was there in '91 to look at Big Bird, Vlaardingenbroek. He was the first one, and I saw him play against Bob Benders, and I thought, well, this is something. And that's where it contradicts itself a bit. If you think about when I stood on the stage myself, where I thought, well, is this actually it? Where I was in the hall watching Bert Vlaardingenbroek play 2 years before that, and I think, I got to be part of this. I want to be part of this. Yeah, what is it? Theatre, this part of this game in this arena. I want to play here. So that's what pushed me through as well, because that was the highest level at that time. So that was all. That's a bit contradicting in what I said earlier, but that's how the difference is how you feel if you're on the stage. Then you think more selfish in a way, like.
So we move on to your time in the PDC, the WDC as it was in the early days. You mentioned there how you won another world title, if you like, with Raymond, with the world pairs. You were playing in a few events as well, but what was it like when you made the switch full time?
Well, you always got to believe in yourself, and it's always nice to reach the highest level, I think, and I'm quite competitive in that sort of thing. So it's good to become a professional and trying to make a living out of it, which meant that you also got to put more hours in it because everybody else is doing that. And then, yeah, it's more like percentage play. It's like if you put more hours into your doubles, then that would be making you a tiny bit, 0.1%, or maybe 4% better than your opponent at a certain time, which might bring you the rescue. So you start thinking different about the game. It's fun, obviously. It's nice, but there is more pressure. Like it's going to be important because it's becoming your livelihood. So I still got to put in the hours, and then. It becomes more of work than it does like actually for your local league playing on a Thursday night. Improved my darts and also my mentality became different through that, and which is nice, I think, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah, and we saw as you made the switch over, you were in the big events almost straight away, the World Match Play, World Grand Prix, 2001 World Championship. You're only the second Dutchman to play in the PDC World Championship. I want to talk to you about 2001, your first major final in the PDC, the World Grand Prix. What are your memories of that week? Because some big wins that week, beating Rod Harrington, John Part and John Lowe 7-1 in the semi-finals.
Absolutely naps. All I can remember is I lost 1 year against James Wade, I think. And I don't remember which year that was, to be really honest. Won the UK Open in 2004, but before that, it's all actually being a blank because you're trying to get as high up on the rankings, like I said, and you're giving it your utmost. But I was never a Phil Taylor, like you know that you're in there and you're coming in to win it. No, you had to fight every game. And as soon as I got out, then I was working on practicing on the week after because you had tournaments nearly every week. I was living more with the future than actually what happened on the time that I've lost.
Just looking back though on your career now, then obviously when you look back, and your biggest achievement in the PDC was that UK Open title. I mean, not many people have won a major title in the PDC. That must have been special though when you look back on it now.
Yeah, that was a really nice win. Obviously, yeah, it suited me down there. I enjoyed the longer games at that time, and I'd liked the atmosphere in there. It was a very good atmosphere, and I was feeling well. All the people that I normally practice with and normally played with throughout the year, everybody obviously was participating. Steve Beat and Dennis Oppens and Colin Lloyd, all my friends, all my dart friends were there, and yeah, it was a good memory. It was nice. I played well, and I was feeling confident, and that gave me the opportunity to win it. And as soon as I got 4-1 ahead in the final against John Part, then I knew in the back of my mind I could never lose this, and that's what happened.
I know you talked about before about you don't really like to look back at tournaments when you were playing, but when you get to the end of a tournament, you lift that big trophy on the TV as well. That must have just been a huge moment really for yourself personally, that all those years of hard work and you've got that big title in your hand.
Yeah, it's brilliant if you could take a trophy away from Phil Taylor at that time, and then that gives you obviously 2 weeks of like floating instead of walking. But after that, you're soon back to reality, and then you got to start again.
2005, you were part of a very special tournament, the first ever Premier League. What was that like in the build-up, being selected for that event, and pretty much unknown, wasn't it, at that time in darts? And we see how big the Premier League is now.
Yeah, it was a sort of a tryout the first year, and the same as it was when we went over to China. And I was always very adventurous for myself as well. As example, I was the first Dutchman to go to America in 1988. I was the first one to go to Russia. I always liked to see overseas, and this was something. Well, it's a first, it's a tryout, and I was selected for it because I was high ranked at that time. And I thought, well, we're going to do this. And Barry Hearn was the organizer, and it was nice organized. It was very good. And there were things that I thought, well, that could have been better, but there are also things that could have gone worse in this case. But it was an experience to play at that time. It's like, especially the first 3-4 nights were like if you were playing the World Championships. And that was good because there was a lot of people in, and that gave you more experience, which you could use again in your ranking events. And because it was televised, other players, besides the 8 that were actually in it, or 7 at that time, I think it was, they had a huge step forwards compared to the rest of the players because they all looked up to you. And it was an experience that they didn't have. And that gave you so much confidence where you could play better during the other events. And that was very nice. That was very, very good for the players who were in it at that time, I think.
Did you ever imagine that the Premier League would get as big as it is now? Obviously, you've got the double header in Rotterdam and the one in Germany and the bigger venues now. But could you ever imagine when you were playing in those first few weeks that's how the Premier League could get?
I thought it would have been, yeah, straight away, because we were playing in sports halls in Exeter we actually played in, and obviously we played in bigger halls as well, which was nice. But I expected it to go bigger, a lot faster, to be really honest. But Barry took it slowly, and he did the right steps in the end. But we started off with halls with 800, 1,000, 2,000, sometimes 3,000. And then we started to grow bigger and bigger and bigger.
In those first couple of Premier Leagues, some great runs from yourself. The first year getting to the semi-finals, just losing out to Phil. And 2006, joined by Raymond van Barneveld, he'd made the switch over to the PDC, and you beat him in the semi-finals, 104 average, beat him 11-3, and then lose out to Phil in the final. But what was it like when Raymond made the switch and he was pushing to get that number one spot? What was it like?
Well, that's always good to have a fellow countryman in an event where you're actually in. You got somebody to talk to. We're both overseas, so in that respect, yeah, it was nice. I had a certain plan for myself, which I had every year. If I give an example, if you know you got to play Phil twice, because the idea is to get into the last 4, as it still is. That's the main aim, and then you got to see what your program is like. And then you say, all right, then there's certain players I'm allowed to lose to, but there's also certain players that I've got to win against. At that time, I was the first one, I think. I had a draw against Phil and against John Part. Recently, then world champion. He was very well playing at that time. So there are certain players from that time where I thought of, well, okay, these are the sort of players I might lose against. But others I want to win, and I want to see with my draws I can make so many points. And then I had a couple of draws which I didn't expect, where I actually expected to lose, where I thought, well, this is a bonus. I just got to keep on my schedule, my form, my way of going, and then I will be in the last 4. And so I had plans not to lose against Raymond twice, obviously, because you're going into it and win it. But I've lost twice, and I thought, well, don't worry about it. These are 2 unexpected. I'll get him the 3rd time because I know he's capable of getting the last 4. And then I got him at the last 4, and then I ripped his head off because I was like months before I was already working on getting into the last 4 and beating whoever was in front of me. And that was the lucky thing at that time, that it was a fellow Dutchman as well.
Definitely. And a couple of years later, though, you drop out of the top 16, I believe, end of 2008, and you had some injury problems as well. I believe your shoulder, you had an operation on it. How hard was it during that time, obviously, with the injuries? They're taking its toll, I'm guessing.
Well, I'm not much of a crier, but I've cried against, oh my God, it was in Germany, and I lost against Mensur Suljovic. I was 4-0 down, and I was in so much agony. I thought I had 50 average at the end of the game, and I lost 6-1, I think. But I was still capable of making 4-1. And one part of my body was crying my eyes out and shouting from pain, and on the other side I thought, how in heaven's name is it possible that I'm losing this game? And I still got one leg where I couldn't play anymore. And then after that I went to the doctors here in Holland, and I had the operation done. And yeah, that was actually the beginning of the end. There was a lump behind my shoulder blade. They took that away, and then they took part of my shoulder blade away, and then the physio started. Yeah, first time you go once a week, and then you go twice a week, and then you go 5 times a week, and then you're there 7 times a week, and then you're twice there a day, then that's 3 times a week, and then you go 7 times a week, and then you go twice 7 times a week, and then you go too fast, and then you're being put backwards again for 6 months. But at that time I was a professional, so it was my income, so I was trying to get back as soon as possible. But it didn't work. And after that, I only had more pain and more pain. I've tried it, I think, until 2013. That was 5 years. I've tried it all together, but it never got back to where I wanted it. So I stopped playing at that time, and I'm still doing exhibitions here and there if I can, but I'm not practicing that much anymore. And I'm tutoring a lot of people, and I'm helping them out as a sort of trainer. And since January, they made me the national trainer of the German team. So I'm giving my experience away down there now.
Excellent. I suppose a lot of the people listening that are fans of you from back in the day when you were at the heights that you were probably wondering what your health's like now. What's the shoulder like now? Obviously, you mentioned there you're not playing that much anymore. Is it okay now?
As long as I'm not playing, it's going all right. But as soon as I start making hours again, then it starts like inflaming itself, then it starts hurting again. So I can't make that many hours. But I'm still playing local competition, and I'm still enjoying my exhibitions here and there with the boys, and I'm still, like I said, I'm giving away I'm doing training with people if they want some. All these are the sort of things I'm still doing.
Great to hear. And it must have been a frustrating time, really, when the injuries did start or get to their worst point. You mentioned the game there about Mensur, because you'd been at such a high standard in the game. You'd won a major title, you'd been in the Premier Leagues, you'd been high up in the rankings, so it must have been tough, really, during that time.
Yeah, it was very tough knowing that you don't feel confident and that you've got to start playing and you've got to do your utmost best, and then it's going and travelling a lot where you know you're going to lose the first round, or you not know it, but you know your game ain't good enough for it, and other players know that as well, because you're in a professional circuit. You should know what your opponent is like, and they all knew that I had an operation, and they all knew from my results that I wasn't playing well, and occasionally I could play well, but that was just occasionally. It wasn't consistent enough, and that was my strength, to be consistent, and that wasn't there anymore.
Your last World Championship appearance ended 2011, the 2012 PDC World Championship. Probably most people remember your last big hurrah really was the 2012 UK Open. You pushed Phil Taylor really close in one of the early rounds, so as you mentioned there, you could still turn it on when you had the chance.
Yeah, but Phil was actually the only player who I've never beaten in the competition. I think I played him 27 times or 28 times, and I've never beaten him. He was the only one, the only exception. I beat him several times in exhibitions, but on the main stage, on the main tour, when it actually needed to be done, I was always getting close, or not always getting close, but I was getting close, but never close enough to actually threaten him or to beat him. And yeah, well, that's life. There's always somebody better in life, isn't there?
Yeah, and you mentioned about some of the bits that you're involved in now with the training, but I suppose a lot of the Dutch fans listening that watch the darts, they'll know you from your time now on the Dutch TV on RTL7 doing the commentary and analyst work. What's that like, being involved still in the sport?
That's still nice. You can see the emotion still on the players, and it's good to see how Michael is doing it and how Vincent is playing, and where your expectations of certain players are higher than of others. And where new players are coming in. Yeah, it's very good to see the revolution of the darts and to see how far they get and what they're doing. And still very proud, of course, that Michael, a Dutchman, is number one in the world.
Yeah, he definitely has been number one for a long time. Just want to finish up with a few questions that we're asking all our guests on this series, and it starts off with the future of the game. Obviously, it's difficult to really talk about at the moment with the virus, but once that's hopefully out of the way, what do you see for the future in darts?
Oh, I think there's still a lot of development possible in, for instance, the tungsten. Is there actually nothing better than tungsten? Improvement in the flights, in the shafts. Now at the moment you see they've all got various points. What will happen in the future with the game? To let's say there were times when they spoke about making the Oki half round, so the distance was 2 or 7 feet everywhere. Everywhere the same, 7'4". They could do all sort of things in the future if there are coming too many 9 darts. It wouldn't surprise me if they make the triples and the doubles smaller, for instance. Or you never know what the future is going to be like. That's good, I think, because that keeps it interesting for everybody.
And lastly, when someone asks you what's your favourite moment, what's the one moment that you'd pick out as being the favourite moment in your career in darts or time spent in darts, what would you say?
Oh, there's a good one. Oh, I've got to think about that. My favourite times of the darts, well, that would actually be when you're getting home and you get a check at home and you see what's on it, and you think, okay, that's nice, I've earned a lot of money this week. Or I didn't earn anything. But most of the time you only remember the good times was when you're winning. When you get the check home, that's, I think, the best feeling that you can get.
Excellent. Well, Roland, it's an absolute pleasure to chat to you. Really appreciate your time and keep up the great work that you're doing in darts still, and well done on a great career.
Thanks very much, and lots of success with the podcast.
Thanks again to Roland for joining us, and our Darts Legend series will be continuing next week. We're going to be joined by the co-founder of the PDC, Dick Alex, so look forward to that one next week. Before then, we're going to be back on Thursday with a more regular episode of the podcast. Myself and Burton DeWitt are going to be chatting about the latest goings on in darts, and hopefully we'll be joined by a few guests as well. So thank you very much everyone for listening, and we'll see you on Thursday.